Hello. So now we're going to make some observations based on adding two numbers with opposite signs, right? So we've seen examples like this before. In this case, we have negative 4 plus 5 equals 1, okay? And here we have negative 7 plus 3 equals negative 4, right? And it gives us a diagram like this, which explains to us how we got that negative 4 plus 5 equals positive 1. But now let's make an observation. Looking at this example, what can we draw from it? We can see that the arrow that represents the sum, in this case this arrow, which is very puny, which represents the 1, corresponds to the direction of the arrow, which is slightly longer, right? And what is its length? Well, we kind of figured out already that if we look at the length, if we look at the arrow of length 5, representing the number 5, and if we look at the arrow that represents the number 4, the number negative 4, they have lengths 5 and 4 respectively, and 5 minus 4 is 1. Okay, so what we're saying is, from this example, we think that the direction of the arrow representing the sum will be that of the two arrows, which is longer, which has greater length. And we can see that the length of the arrow representing the sum will correspond to the difference of the length of the arrows, where you take the length of the smaller one subtracted from the length of the larger arrow. Okay, let's see if that same kind of idea holds here. If we look at this example here, it's kind of more exaggerated, the difference of the arrows represent the numbers being added. And so we can see, the arrow representing the negative number, which is negative 7 here, is much longer than the arrow representing the 3 here. And so you can see that, the arrow representing the sum does in fact have the same direction as the arrow representing the numbers being added, which is longer. And moreover, how long is the arrow that represents the sum? Well, we know that the arrow that represents the negative 7 here is 7. We know that the arrow representing the 3 here is 3. What's 7 minus 3? That's 4. And you can see that that is indeed the length of this arrow, which represents the sum of these two numbers. And so you can see that in both cases, the arrow, if you look at the arrows representing the numbers being added, the arrow that is longer will have the direction of the sum of the arrow that represents the sum. In this case, the positive number, which is 5, had the longer arrow representation, and hence the sum was positive. And in this case, it was the negative 7 that had the arrow representing it, which was longer, and so the sum was negative. In other words, it was going to the left, had the direction to the left. And the length of the arrow representing the sum in both cases was the difference of the lengths of the arrows that represented the numbers being added, where the smaller length was subtracted from the bigger length. Okay? So now I'm going to write a verbal description of that, and then we will proceed. So here I have prepared for us a verbal description of the observation we have just made. Okay? When adding two numbers of opposite sign, the direction of the arrow representing the sum will be the same as that of the longer of the two arrows which represent the numbers being added, and the length of the arrow which represents the sum will be the difference of the lengths of the arrows representing the numbers being added, where the smaller length is subtracted from the larger length. Okay? So, for example, in this case, I know that if I were to represent these numbers as arrows, the length of the negative 4 will be 4, the length of the 5 will be 5, and the length of the arrow representing 5 will be 5. So I know that the one that is bigger will be the one in the direction of the arrow, right? And that will correspond to the positive, because this one's because this one would have the longer arrow, and we can see that visually here. And we can see that is in fact the direction of the sum. And also we can see that its length, the 1, is exactly 5 minus 4. All right? And then here, this one has length 7 minus 3, which is 4. Right? And it's in the direction of the arrow, which is longer. In the next video, we're going to translate our language regarding the arrows representing the number and the direction into more standard terminology. We are going to restate these rules in that standard terminology, and then we're going to apply it to problems without reference to the number line, so that we can use it in our day-to-day lives and in many examples to come. Thank you so much.